thankfully. Thank you, Jessica. Okay. Yes. So, so I wanted to talk this evening about rethinking critical thinking. I've been thinking a lot about it. It's something I hear a lot. It's like, are you teaching critical thinking skills, or like, are you going through a critical thinking program? And something didn't sit right with me. Every time I heard that, I'm like, I don't know. So I said, well, if I do a talk about it, I'll have to sort out what I think about it, and I'll have to figure it out. So I challenged myself, and it's been fabulous. I've enjoyed immensely kind of doing this study. So I'd love to do it kind of more in an interactive style. So if you have questions, or if you hear me say something, raise your hand, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this. And so what we're going to start with is we're going to start with defining critical thinking, or at least what I've kind of outlined to think about critical thinking. That way we know that way you know what I'm rethinking. Okay, so here's kind of a definition that I've come up with. It's and I was largely helped with Google on this, because I just wanted to understand what is the general idea out there. So critical thinking skills involve the ability to objectively analyze, evaluate, and interpret information to form well-reasoned judgments and reach logical conclusions. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's an accurate definition? Sounds about right? Okay, yes, it's packed. Okay, critical thinking skills involve the ability to objectively analyze, evaluate, and interpret information to form well-reasoned judgments and reach logical conclusions. Objectivity is kind of a farce. Okay. Okay. No, I'm interested in all the feedback right now. We'll get into my thoughts in a bit, but I just want to hear, like, what is your initial reaction to that? Is that something I need to start talking to my 7-year-old about, or my 15-year-old?
It would get into life skills.
Life skills?
Like how you're living.
Yeah.
Casually.
Okay. Oh, you're stealing my thunder over there. I love it. Okay. Yeah, so like it's part of life. But as Brittany said, she kind of gave me away there. She said it's part of the trivium, and I'll go on to talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, so key aspects of critical thinking, as we already said, is objectivity, right? So you want to look at something from a neutral and unbiased standpoint. We want to assess the information. We don't want to get our emotions or beliefs involved. We just want to look at this thing like we're AI. We want to analyze and evaluate. So that means breaking down complex information into smaller parts and scrutinize each component, right? So we're going to be objective. We're going to look at all the interesting pieces. We're not going to have any emotions about it, and anything you believe, you can just shelve that for now. And then we're going to learn to interpret. So if we're a good critical thinker, we're going to carefully examine the facts and the data. So once we've shelved our emotions, we don't talk about what we believe. We look at all the pieces, and then we interpret. Okay. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure how you interpret without involving what you believe.
Yeah.
That's just my take.
Isn't that also what we're doing with our children when we're giving them the Bible all the time? We're giving them that lens to
right. Right. So like you've already, by saying without letting your personal beliefs or emotions unduly influence, you already got me kind of going, okay, but I have a belief system that is not negotiable.
Yeah.
As in, I'm a Christian, I believe the Bible is the word of God, and that's going to influence, it's going to influence everything.
And what they're saying is essentially stand for nothing.
Yeah.
And be swayed.
So is it possible though? Is it possible for us to stand to find a standpoint where we can be completely unemotional, no beliefs? Is that even possible? Yeah, I don't think that's possible. Now, again, this is a definition that I've been looking for like online. So I don't know. this is kind of like a general definition, which is why I think it's important we review this, because it may be that I'm using a general definition of critical thinking that isn't what other people would use. So, and then, okay, so, but if we can do that, be objective, we can analyze and evaluate, and then we can interpret, then we will have a rational conclusion, right? Because we have shelved our belief systems and we have no emotions, and now we are rational. Or we're AI. Okay, so that's kind of just an overview of an interpretation that I've kind of crowdsourced. Now, well, I think there's a place for critical thinking. Don't get me wrong. I think I would tweak the definition a little bit, but I think that there is a place for critical thinking. There is a place for us to actually be able to analyze and interpret and evaluate and all those things. I do not think that this is something that we should be teaching children. Okay, so something that drew me to what we now call classical education is that and actually I would lump Charlotte Mason education into this as well, is that it actually prescribes a very deliberate process for how to teach a child, like from childhood into adolescence and beyond. And these ideas were largely being hammered out by academics in the medieval ages, in the medieval times. And what's fascinating to me is that we're now learning through modern psychology that what the medievals believed and observed to be true for a good and a beautiful education for a child is actually now supported by science today. If we study neurodivergencies, we study brain development, we're starting to see that actually this medieval prescription that we call the trivium now makes scientific sense. And if you heard me speak before, you've heard me talk about the trivium, but I'm going to repeat. I'll just define it again, just in case we all need a refresher. So the trivium it's Latin for the three roads, or the three ways that we teach as a child progresses. And as I talk through this, yes, this is helpful to teach a child in this way. But if we think about it, this is actually a process for learning anything at all. Okay, you want to learn something new? Follow this process. So the trivium, the three ways of the trivium are called grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Okay. Now I want to take a little bit of I want to take a look at these from a different angle from what we would normally look at them. We often look at them from like, well, what is grammar? How do we teach grammar? How do we teach? And we're not going to look at it like that. I'm kind of going to look at it from almost a psychology side or a taxonomy. And I want to show you that I think that if we teach critical thinking skills the way it was defined initially to children, then we're actually undermining an extremely important foundation. So has anyone heard of Dorothy Sayers' essay, The Lost Tools of Learning? Just raise your hand. That's pretty good. Yeah, I'm impressed. So you've read it? Good, bad, what's your impression? Love it, hate it, meh? Do you remember? I read it like 15 years ago. I had to refresh my memory. You just heard it? I've talked about it. Fair point, very fair. Okay, so I went back to it because I remember reading it a while ago and I thought, this is good, but this, I don't know, there's something wrong with it. But it was really helpful from the angle that we're going to look at today. Dorothy Sayers she wasn't an educator. She was actually one of the Inklings. She's very, is not well known, but she's one of the Inklings. So she was a very dear friend of C.S. Lewis. And in the 1940s, she rocked a pair of trousers. And she smoked a pipe with the Inklings, and she had philosophical discussions with them in the back room. And I love her. I would have enjoyed hanging out with her. So she was an author. So she wrote a lot of mystery novels. She was just a fascinating person. But she also lived in Oxford, and education there would have been. They were coming kind of off of what we now call classical education, because anything that's classic means it's coming back from where it was, right? And she was the Inklings, Lewis, Tolkien, Sayers. They were actually just at the tail end of what was then a very rich classical education. It was changing dramatically at that point to what we have today. And so education was under attack. Education as they knew it, and what we now call, we're trying to get back to, was under attack. And so she's been asked to write this speech for a dinner party. And in her very cheeky way, she puts this thing together. It's about 20 pages. It's a very easy read. And her humor shines through. It's quite funny. But it's interesting to me, this one, like even as she's starting, right in her introduction, she says this. This is 1948. Without apology, then, I will begin. But since much that I have to say is highly controversial, it will be pleasant to start with a proposition with which I feel confident all teachers will cordially agree. So what we're going back to now, sometimes it's like, it feels controversial today. Well, it's been that way for a while. So we're in Dorothy Sayers' company. We're in great company. So the what I love the most about this article, or this paper that she wrote, is how succinct it is. And it kind of describes classical education, or education the way it was back then. It's really hard to put it into a nutshell, because what it is it's generations and years, thousands of years of listening and understanding and developing and teaching human beings, and human beings change, and societies change, and cultures change. So she boils it down in her essay. So she starts with the grammar stage. Of course, that's the beginning part, and she calls it the pole parrot stage. And the reason why is the grammar stage is when, like, typically up to like about age 8 and 9. And now ages, I'm going to use ages here, but I really want you to hold that loosely. I also, if it was the perfect world and I had control, I would get rid of grading systems. It would be gone completely. We would just have like the grammar stage, and that would go up until a child was able to move into the dialectic stage, which is going to be somewhere between 9, 10, 11, right? The grammar stage is that stage when learning is very easy for a child, and a child is very easily impressed, because the entire world is brand new. Like if you take a moment and you think about, like, this dear child emerges from the womb and there's this world. Fantastical. We've become cynical. We've become jaded. The world is somewhat like, it's boring. We're tired. Seriously, folks. But to a child, like, it is brand new. It is amazing. It is, do not tell that child what is going on. Let them figure it out. Let them find the wonder of it. And then talk to them about what it is. Don't prescribe for them. Describe for them. Tell them what is going on. And that Dorothy Sayers says it's the pole parrot, because they will repeat it. You know this, right? They repeat things and repeat things. And we want to keep that fresh. We want to keep that innocence alive, because they're soaking things up. Their innocence is soaking things up, right? And the very worst thing, you think about a child, the very worst thing you can do to a 5-year-old looking at a glassy, smooth lake is to say, let's deconstruct this. Let's analyze this. I don't care how you feel. I don't care what you're thinking at this moment. Let's deconstruct this. That's terrible. Don't do that. What we want to do is the opposite thing. We want to actually let them view this, and we want to inspire them to be filled with wonder. We want them even to see beyond it, to see the spiritual, that there is something beyond this world, that there is someone in control, that there is someone greater than them. And as a child, largely up to grades 8 and 9, we have that opportunity, right? You know, if you've had children of this age, which I'm sure we all do, you can see in them that there is just such there's such an innocence, and such a, in some sense, we have the ability to influence their moral imagination. This is a term I love to use, is their moral imagination, right? Because they don't know. They don't know anything. Anything you tell them, especially as a parent, anything you tell them, that's gospel truth. And so it's important that we teach them what the truth is. We allow them to awaken their wonder. And a term that I like to use, and is often used in the classical world, is a term called piety. We need to teach them piety. And by piety, I mean we need to teach them devotion, respect, and submission to authority. And they're learning how relationships work, right? So they need to know, what is authority, who are the authority figures over me, and what does it look like to respect these authority figures, and how does my relationship work, and what does safety look like in obedience and submission and all these things. So that's what we're doing with these little children. We are pouring into them, and we are teaching them at their level. Now, we can allow them to make certain choices, poor choices. In fact, it's good for them to start to, test these things. because at those ages and at those stages, a poor choice might be something like trying to eat an ice cream cone while going down the slide at the playground. Like, hey, go for it. And then it's going to end in tragedy, and then we're all going to be really sad because your ice cream is lying on the ground and you can't eat it. But the child can handle that consequence, right? It's huge for them, but they can handle it. And so we let them handle those little consequences, but that's as far as we go. And that is, that's kind of what the medievals, what Dorothy Sayers is calling the pole parrot age. The next stage of the trivium is the dialectic. Anybody? Does anybody remember what the dialectic is? It's logic, yes. What is it? The history, kind of. Well, what's one of the defining features of the dialectic? Like, if you look practically at a child, that's a big one. They're forming their own ideas, but how are they doing that? Defiantly, fair. Defiantly, yes. What's another way that, like, suddenly they're bursting out of this? Okay, wait a minute. You know, the whole. It's like the innocence sort of shatters in a sense, and they're like, wait a minute, I get to make a choice here. Like, I actually have a little more power and confidence in my ability to choose, right? And what is a defining feature of that in a child, especially when they hit 10, 11, 12? Not quite puberty yet. We're not there yet.
Hormones.
Sorry. Yeah, questions, right? You have an 11-year-old. There you go. Yes. Yeah.
I've had to limit him. Sometimes it's like, Nate, you get one more question, and then no more questions.
Yeah. And it can be kind of hard because as a parent, you're like, wow, their brain is awakening. They're thinking these are good questions. Like, and I'm exhausted. And if I keep answering your questions, I'm going to start lying to you, and that won't be healthy for anybody. And so you have to stop. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's the dialectic. It's kind of the logic stage. It's that point where they're starting to, what Dorothy Sayers calls it, she calls it the pert stage. I love that because they actually get pert. Now, this is where I want to kind of draw in a little bit about brain development. I have to be careful that I don't go down a rabbit trail because I've been reading on neurodivergencies and brain development, and I could change tracks and talk about that. But I want to talk about how that relates to this dialectic stage. So there is something called synaptic pruning, and that occurs at a rapid rate right around ages 9 and 10, right? And that's when those neurons that they don't need anymore start to shed. And it's almost like it's like it clears out some of that fog, and they can actually focus a little bit more. They actually have a little bit more space to think and to learn. And so, interestingly enough, the medievals already knew this. That's why they created this 3 roads path. They're like, oh, funny, we should teach a child like this and this. It seems to work this way. Dorothy Sayers called it, right? And now we have science proving it, right? So for me, this is just a fascinating piece where science is actually the final word on it. It's not the word. It's just the final. It's just proving what we already knew. And so I think that's a very important piece of information for us to understand, is that the chemical signals going on in a child's brain, the neurology happening in their brain, is actually backing up a lot of this. And so we don't actually want to interfere with those early years. There's actually psychological, scientific stuff going on in the brain there. Let it be. And so when they hit that 9, when that synaptic pruning happens, then they do start to. It's like they enter in a new phase. They're like, whoa, what is going on? What is going on in the world? And that's where we allow them to start asking questions, and we actually start to begin that discernment process. Again, I don't believe, especially when they're in this stage, I don't believe for a second that it is a healthy thing to teach a child like that to start analyzing and deconstructing their world. I think it would be somewhat damaging to that foundation. And that foundation, what I've been talking about, is that understanding of what authority is, those relationships that we have around us, who those authorities are, submission to those authorities, and learning to obey those authorities, right? So in that child stage, we've really taught them that. Like, these are your parents, this is your church, this is your government, these are the big authorities that are over you. It's important that you learn how to obey them and how to listen to them. And then when they hit this dialectic stage, again, they're going to start testing those authorities. Part of the questioning is because they're like, wait a minute, how do you know? Like, how do you know, Mom? Right? You've told me this is an authority. How do you know? And they're going to start kicking against that foundation that you kind of set for them. And that's not because they don't trust you or don't believe you. It's because they're testing it. You've told them for years this is how it goes, and now they're testing it. You've been their prefrontal cortex for a long time. You're going to be for a few more years yet. But for them, that's starting to emerge, and they need to know that what you've said is true and that they can rely on you. So again, while they're testing that foundation and while they're testing the relationship with you and while you're both having meltdowns and you're trying to understand as the parent, like, why would my child do this to me? You have to understand they're doing that to you because they trust you. They feel safe with you. They know that they want to know that everything you've ever told them, you're going to stand by it, even if they become very difficult. That's an extremely important part. Now, this can be even more difficult because we live in a world where authorities that should have been safe and trustworthy turn out not to be safe. And our world is increasingly becoming like that, right? We can see that on a large scale with government. We like have to obey the leaders of the land, the leaders of the country. We just went through like a crisis in terms of government and how do we trust the leaders of our government. And then with churches, I know a lot of church people who've been hurt by churches. And yet I believe firmly that the churches do have an authority under God to shepherd the people. But what do we do when, as a family or as a child, we've been hurt by a church? And then ultimately we can see it in families too, as like parents or grandparents become untrustworthy and a child has to deal with these difficult things, right? So this becomes critical in that dialectic stage then, where we don't say to them, well, let's analyze this. Let's sit back, let's talk about what happened with this church situation. Who went wrong here? I know they should have been your authority, but what did they? That's not at all the case. I think that when we have children going through this dialectic stage and they're testing everything and an authority has actually failed them, then we need to be honest with them. We need to say, like, they should have been there for you. They should have been available to you. And then it becomes even more important for us as the reliable authorities who are trying so hard as parents to be trustworthy, to be there for them. I think it becomes really important then that we actually go out and seek trustworthy authorities so that we show them, like, the problem isn't the authority, right? Like, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Don't throw out all authorities and deconstruct who you are and everything about what you've been told. Understand that you've been failed. The authorities were not trustworthy, and that happens sometimes. And so we need now to refocus. And so in the dialectic stage, that can be extremely difficult because they're already testing the authorities. But if you come across that, and I think in this world, I think we inevitably are going to, at some point, we are going to have authorities fail our children. But don't be discouraged. Don't think that, oh, there's no hope now. That's not at all it. In fact, I think to some degree that will strengthen our children. That will strengthen our parenting and our relationship with them to be able to say, yeah, that was wrong, or that was a failure to you. I don't know. Has anybody experienced that? Exercising our reason. Yeah. Right. Right.
Being honest about it. I mean, to their own self.
Right. Yeah, like, you're right. So like as an adult, that's where you're using your critical thinking skills at max, right? But you're not doing that in front of your child and saying, this is how we're going to do it. But you are in fact coming to a conclusion, coming to an understanding, and then helping your child work through what happened so that they still see and respect authority, right? But they don't need to do that critical thinking part. The adult does, right?
I think also, like, I look at it as standing on principle, I guess. You're building like their principles that faith. That's at least how I was raised in that way. And so
That's
when
very
you
good.
see another even authority within your own family, and you are like, but wait, this is a principle issue.
Yep.
This is wrong. And here are the reasons why, and blah, blah, blah. Like, I think I didn't need someone to tell me the reasons of why that was wrong, but I had the principle already instilled.
Yeah.
And so it didn't line up.
Right.
And it's like already then the kids are able to make like, but wait, that was so wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would they do that? Right. And so now they're seeing what was supposed to be based on principle and what actually happened.
Right.
And now they're already opening up their own and reasoning.
Right. And that's because what you're using is principle, I would use as foundation, because
Yes.
we've laid that foundation, or we've
Yes.
showed them the principles through
Yeah.
those young years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when they hit this dialectic stage and something happens, they feel in their bodies, this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But why do they feel that?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were raised to rely on a certain kind of wonder and a certain kind of stability, and these authorities were there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ordering of loves,
The highest
absolutely.
authority is Christ,
Yeah.
which is why we cannot explicitly follow it.
Yeah.
Because it's not in line with the great.
Yeah.
It's not a question of which authority or not, it's which authority.
That's right.
And that one trust.
Well, exactly. And I think so, and because the idea of submission can be really snarly, right? It's like exactly. But I think it's really key to understand that, like, the Bible calls us to submission. So we can't say like, oh, no submission because, it's completely abused. It's been abused, yada yada. Fine. That can have happened. But the Bible says we need to submit to Christ, right? And so it's like you're saying, if we understand the order of submission, if we're learning and teaching our children submission to Christ, then when those other things happen, people hurt them in the name of Christ, and it's clearly not what Christ would say should happen, then we can show them, yes, but here's your like, the submission has to be vertical towards Christ, not necessarily horizontal toward this person who's hurting you, right? So that's what I mean by like those foundations, because when these things happen and your kids start asking questions and kicking at the truths and the world starts doing its thing, you want that foundation. You don't want to have them go, well, let's break this down. Okay. And then finally, we come to, in the trivium, we come to that third road, which is called, anybody? Rhetoric. Absolutely. And Dorothy Sayers called it the poetic stage. And it is, in my opinion, the very best stage. So, because this is when your children actually can start to analyze, and they actually can start to take things and look at the individual pieces and ask questions. So, and interestingly enough, again, back to the brain stuff, because that's really interesting to me, that between the ages of 12 and 20, that's when the pruning occurs, mostly in the brain's prefrontal cortex. And one of the things I was reading said that a person is actually not fully qualified to be able to do effective critical thinking until they've hit age 20. Because until that point, it was fascinating to me. Until that point, their brains are still developing.
18, that makes sense.
In that, right? Like, God was like, you're gonna have to teach them right until 20, right until they walk out that front door. They're all yours, right? So, and I found that very interesting, because when you get to the rhetoric stage, the poetic stage, that's when you have kids or teenagers who are now ready to express themselves. And express they do. Express they do, right? They have something to say, and we want to listen. So this is where, yes, yeah. It comes out in clothing and in music and in, hairstyles and in, you name it, the things they will do that, we look at, and I'm very guilty of this. I've judged people and I've been like, I cannot believe you were doing that. Like, that's because they're trying to express themselves, and the reaction I gave them is exactly what they wanted. That's exactly what they wanted. It was the dopamine hit. It was exactly the dopamine hit they want. That was what they wanted. I've learned not to judge. I've learned to go, oh, it's a particularly rough week this week, isn't it? Yeah. But Yes, it is. But I also think it's the most exciting stage, because that's also the stage where you're learning the most about them, and you're able to like allow them to express themselves. Again, if that foundation is intact and secure, they're always going to come back to you. They're always going to go back to their faith. They're always going to go back to the authorities that they want to submit to and that they are safe with, because they feel safe there. They're going to go out and do the wackiest things and come home. But the one tool that I want to talk about for the rhetorical stage is something called Socratic dialogue. And I think Socratic dialogue is actually a really effective way of teaching critical thinking. So anybody know about Socratic dialogue? Have you heard of it?
You ask the question, so leave.
No.
Nope. Hey.
Yes and no. Well, the reason why I say no so forcefully is because you're mostly right, but we actually don't ask them questions to lead them to the right answer. We ask them questions so that they come to a knowledge of like a knowledge and a wisdom inside themselves that's true. So because it's almost like there's no right answer, like there is. Yeah. Right? But we don't.
I guess how I said it was like very pointed, but no, it's like, no, you're gonna be led to find
the truth. Yes. So it's not like I have an answer in my head. I'm going to ask you questions until you get that answer.
And you have to this quote.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like that. It's like we want them to encounter who God is. We want them to encounter truth, beauty, and goodness. And they will through our questioning process. But the whole point of Socratic dialogue, which is so beautiful, is that it gives space for who each child is, the circumstances that they're in, what they've read, what they believe, and it allows them to kind of take all those things into consideration. It's kind of in one sense.
And that's teaching them how to think.
Yes. Yes.
You're teaching them the way they should go.
Yes, exactly. So in some sense, so this definition of critical thinking that I have, it says we have to assess information without letting their personal beliefs or emotions unduly influence their judgment. I would say what Socratic dialogue does is it helps them to place their personal beliefs and their emotions so that they can come to an understanding of truth, goodness, and beauty, and their emotions and beliefs align to the truth. So we don't shelve them, we actually shape them. We train them, we order them, we point them, right? That's the whole point of, in my mind, critical thinking.
And then you have the scriptures like child in the way they should go, and then this training.
Yes.
It's not so simple, or like, this way, it's like, no, you're gonna form it. Like,
yes. Because often I find that verse, train a child in the way they should go and they will not depart from it. And then you see this person, they're like, that's where you need to go. Right? It's like
only there.
Yeah, exactly.
Only there.
That's the path. It's like, and then the child grows up and they're like, you're not even on the path. Like, what did I do wrong? It's like, no. The way he should go is the way through the cross to Christ, right? That's the way he should go. And that's going to look so different for every child. So if we train them using the Socratic dialogue, using them how to think and how to engage their emotions and their beliefs, and maybe change their beliefs because they're not in line with scripture, then the way they should go is going to be the right way, but it may not be anywhere we even thought was possible, right? And so we have to hold that way more loosely.
Okay, sorry, I don't know if it's
Go for it.
Total side thing, but as you're talking about the
trivium,
I was thinking about parenting as far as it comes to discipline and training of a child.
Yeah.
Because of the young ages, you give them a grammar stage.
Yeah.
This is the rule. You obey the first time. You listen right away.
Yeah.
You'll listen all the way. It's very, very strict.
Yeah.
But then as they get older, or I've experienced in my parenthood, there's been explained the why.
Yeah.
Well, why do we do this
the
first time?
Yeah.
Like at 3, I don't have time to tell you the car's going to hit you. Like, I mean, you can at the basic levels.
Yeah.
But you get to an age where like they're 8 and 9. Like, why am I telling you? Why is this so important?
Yeah.
Like, we need to obey our parents so we can learn to obey God the first time.
Yeah.
Because the consequences are so much higher. But then I was like listening to one parenting course, and it kind of blew my mind. But then they taught the art of the appeal.
Okay.
And so the father is always how this family did it. Is the father is always the head of the home, and they kind of need to do a little bit of a pivot where the mom is actually like driving the train.
Yeah.
But
she's kind of shouldering with the child and saying, it's just the rules of the house. You can go this, and she teaches how to appeal, and she teaches. So she, like, again, really forming. It's like the best thing where she's actually, because dad's at work, and then this house, she was at home, and so she's actually enforcing the rules, but she's kind of, anyway, probably butchering it. Point is, teaching the art of the appeal, and you're teaching, like, if you disagree with the rules, you need to appeal to your father respectfully, honoringly, and how do you, and again, that's coming into rhetoric, and where you're doing the rhetoric where, like, these are my thoughts, this is my opinion, this is how I want to do it, and how can I do it honoringly? And anyway,
Yeah,
kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, I and that's where I would say, like, when they're younger, you let them experience consequences to poor decisions that they can handle, right? Like, no, we're not going to let you run out in the street and get hit by a car. You can't handle that. So we're going to actually physically grab you and hold you. I don't care if you're kicking and screaming. This is too much. But yeah, we will let you walk around the playground with your ice cream and it can fall all over the ground because that is something you can handle. And we're going to do that at age appropriate levels as they get older. And then we can also go back and say, well, remember I told you not to do that? And they start to listen and they start to pay attention, right? And so that's why I do think that's kind of the process that we're taking here is, I read from, there's this book, Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Tripp. And he wrote something that I still remember to this day. He's like, when a child is little, you have 100%, one of your tools is 100% physical force. You can pick up that child, you can hold them, they will go where you want them to go, no questions asked, right? When they're 18, you have 0% physical force. And so if you want that child to go somewhere, good luck if you've only ever relied on physical force because you've lost your child, right? So what do we have, right? Well, at the beginning, we need physical force because, well, they don't have reasoning abilities. But as they get older, there's that curve where physical force has to drop off because they have to learn to use their brain. Because when they're 18, we need 100% reasoning, listening, obedience, respect, submission, all these things, right? So, and that's kind of the curve we're going for is, yeah, we have to start with physical, but we don't want to end there when you're 18, right? And so, yeah, there's the art of appeal as they're getting older. And it's the most difficult. I wouldn't say it's the most difficult in the sense that they don't respond or they don't listen. But I think for myself as a parent, it's the most difficult in this rhetoric stage because it actually challenges my own ordered loves. It challenges my own thinking, where they'll ask questions. I'll be like, I don't want to talk about that right now. But guess what? We're talking about it because we have to, because they're asking the question, right? So yeah, so that's what basically Socratic dialogue is. So I wanted to do a little bit of talking about Socratic dialogue just to kind of help us because it's critical thinking, but I think it's like it's the Christian version of critical thinking. And so I'm going to refer to this book here, Socratic Conversations. Bringing the dialogues of Plato and the Socratic tradition into today's classroom. It's for classrooms, but hey, man, we can use it with our teenagers. Tell me if any of this resonates with how you parent or how you thought that you should parent or educate, for that matter. With an overview of some of the most important dialogical virtues in mind. So this is a big thing about Socratic dialogue too, is we want to keep the virtues at the top. And the goal is that we want the children to understand the virtues, like faith, hope, and love. And I would even say, like, virtues can be the fruits of the spirit, right? We want them to understand these things: temperance, patience, all these virtues, because one of the goals is to get our children to be reaching for these things, to want to be more patient, more temperate, especially teenagers. We want them not to lose hope and have faith and all these things. So one of the points of Socratic dialogue is to kind of bring them to a deeper understanding of what those virtues look like in their lives. Okay, so with an overview of some of the most important dialogical virtues in mind, we are now prepared to briefly consider a few guidelines for effective Socratic conversation. As odd as it may sound at first, arguably the most essential practice for anyone to master who wishes to excel in Socratic conversation is active, attentive listening. Among those first learning the art, many a conversation is derailed because the participants are either not listening to one another, not paying attention to the text, or both. How do we resonate with that? When you think about your child, your teenager, are you thinking, I better sit down and listen? Or I better make sure they know who's boss and how things go around this house? Right? Okay. This one's really tough for me. Staying on topic is fundamental. I don't do that very well. Another one, it says, avoid serial monologue. All too often, Socratic conversations among unseasoned participants degenerate into one speaker after another simply saying what is on his mind, paying little or no attention to the flow of the conversation. That is so hard to do, right? So if we want to have a conversation, or we want to have a Socratic conversation, how can we form questions in our minds to have other people thinking and bringing about a discussion on whatever subject's at hand? Okay, rather than saying, I think this, I read this, like what I'm doing right now. How do we ask questions? It's really, really hard. And always refer to the text or the work. So this is assuming that we're doing Socratic dialogue around literature, around some kind of text or some kind of source, right? Some kind of idea. And so always refer to the text. Again, how often do we, and that's why it was really important to me when we start, like, what is critical thinking? Before we talk about anything, do we know what we are talking about? Whether we're going to critique it, or we're going to agree with it, or we're going to discuss it, do we know what we're talking about? Or have we just listened to the neighbors, or the news, or the gossip, or we read a newspaper article and suddenly we formed all these opinions on some political situation happening south of us? Or do we actually take time to look into what it is that we're going to talk about, whether we like it or not? And I think those are really important things, especially when our children reach that rhetoric stage and that poetic stage. Those principles I just talked about right now. We want our teenagers to know what we're talking about. We want them to know how to find the information that it is we're talking about. We're not going to just, I read some article, or did you hear so and so, or like, let's not do that, right? That's not helpful. The second, avoid serial monologue. Here. Yeah.
Everybody's participating.
Exactly. Because everybody needs to, so yeah. Right. We want to, so all too often Socratic conversations among unseasoned participants degenerate into one speaker after another, simply saying what's on his mind, paying little or no attention to the flow of conversation. Now, how many of you have been, confession, okay? I have a really hard time with women's Bible studies. Sorry. How many of you have been to a women's Bible study? And I'm saying women's Bible study because that's the most experience I have with Bible studies. I've tried. And I just finally one day said, I need to understand it. And it's this. Because you come to the study and you've read the passage and everybody's done their study. And someone starts and says, well, I think the Bible says this. And I think it's really important that we do this and we change this and this. And next, no, I don't think so. See, when I read that, I thought that so-and-so. And then this person over there, and and okay, fine, next. Well, I didn't see that at all, but I do agree with you. And like everyone just has their say, and we all get up and say, great study, and we go home. Like, was that actually a Bible study, or was that just everyone giving their opinion on what they think the passage said? Right?
Diary entry.
It was a diary entry, yes. And so that's what he's saying here. We don't want to get into a situation where everyone comes to the table with what they agree or understand, spout it out. Don't listen. Like if you're at a table with 5 other people, you've got 5 other perspectives. So you should be speaking 1/6 of the time, right? If you're the 6th person. In an hour, you've got 10 minutes. You're listening for 40. Yes. Yeah, so I just want, we'll go right there. So it's not just a listening thing, but you're listening to ask informed questions of what's happening. So you can, and you,
There is a flow instead of
yes,
so that you're building on.
yes,
And getting them to the truth, essentially.
yes,
Hopefully you are going to cite that word.
yes, yes, right? So you can have an opinion about the work. Okay, so that, given your opinion, how do you see what you've just explained? Bring out the virtue of perseverance, because this text we read talked about some character who had to do this really tough thing. And so based on what you just said, how does that connect with the perseverance that's being displayed by this character here? So can you explain that more? Can you tie that to the... Yeah. Yeah. There's 3 stages. I'm not forgetting about you. Socratic dialogue really has 3 stages to it. Again, it goes back to the grammar, logic, and rhetoric, but within Socratic, it's called something different. So the first stage is called the metanoia stage. And that's the point where, in Socratic dialogue, we're understanding each other. We're talking back and forth, say, okay, what do you mean by that? Can you define your terms? Can you help me understand where you're coming from? Where did you get that information? What is your source, right? And then that's the metanoia stage. And then we come to the next stage. I don't remember what it is. There's a Greek term for it. And that's the stage where we go, huh. So if you think that and you think that, wouldn't we draw the conclusion then that? Okay, so because now all of our collective ideas are on the table. And so now all of our belief systems are seeing the perspective, the thing from 6 different perspectives, right? It's like shining a flashlight on like a disco ball, and now we've got light everywhere, not just there, right? And so the collective brains are going, oh, I think I know what's going on. And that's actually one of the most beautiful stages, is when, as the collective brains kind of understand and our beliefs start to change to more towards the truth and to understanding virtue, and especially with kids, right? They can get really excited about this. Then the final stage is the mimetic stage. And that's where you're like, okay, but now I want to do that. So this is my fact. These are my facts. This is how we came to understand this truth. But now let's go live it, right? The best teachers, the best Socratic teachers act as midwives to deeper knowledge, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And if they get to it, they will never forget it. But if you lecture them, they'll never get it. They'll never remember it, right? So that's why you're kind of a midwife to bringing them, like especially for these teenagers, so they hit 18, 19, and you're helping them to kind of come into truth, really. It's beautiful. Brittany.
If we are, I guess, if we're all critical enough thinkers, but I think you can also have an effort trying to work out.
But
Yeah.
I think also in our society, we don't actually get that level of conversation.
Totally.
Like, I don't think we even get to the first station. Like, we don't even know what the other people are thinking. Everyone just comes with their things to spout off. This is my opinion. This is what I have. This is how you hurt me. This is how whatever.
Yeah.
And this is my point. And I'm going to tell you my point. There's no, so why do you think that?
Sorry.
And we don't have
I
any
just-
time to go,
Sorry.
you think that? That's why you're doing this. Oh,
Right.
well, now I have understanding for how you're doing it. Okay, so this is then where that leads to. And like, we don't have that in a society. It would be wonderful. It would
Yeah.
help so many issues.
I think some of that too is that where we have
Yep,
to
exactly.
and write it down so we can demonstrate that we can write.
Yep.
Or so much it's about authoritarian leadership.
Yeah, authoritarian leadership is a huge problem, right? It's not that, and again, like I'm talking about authority through this whole thing. I believe in authorities, right? But there's a difference between someone who comes down and says, listen, I know what to believe about this. I'm educated. I've done all the things. You just need to submit to me. That is a problem to me, right?
Because like you said about like all the lights trying to add all the words, but it's just like, but then you don't, everyone's just going off for one thing where you don't get the power of all the brains working together. You don't get the power of everyone working together. You don't get the power of everyone like, oh, that's right, and buy-in and all these sort of things.
So, okay, go ahead.
So, and also just thinking about my own life, I think then you don't actually open up the dialogue with your children that you are allowed to actually come to the table with a completely different opinion and also maybe different belief system. And to me, the scariest thing for me is my kids not telling me their belief system.
Yeah.
Because they could look like they have the same one as me until adulthood hits and boom,
Yeah.
you don't have the same one. And so what have you done to foster the safety to have these open discussions
Yes.
and not be the gavel and the judge and kind of foster it in the way that it should go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually said this a few times. It might sound super controversial, but I stand by this. One of the reasons why we need quote unquote safe places in universities and beyond these days is because these adults did not have space when they were teenagers to have safe spaces and to test the boundaries and to do exactly what our dialectics need to do and to do what teenagers need to do when they express themselves with whatever extreme thing they need to do and go home and mom and dad are going to be there and listen to me. That doesn't mean we're going to agree with them necessarily, but they need that safe space, if you will, because if they haven't learned how to express themselves or how to have an opinion respectfully or all the different ways, how do we expect them to go out into the world? The world is a lot harsher than us parents are going to be, right? Yes.
Every comment section.
Yeah. Nobody's listening.
So I think it takes some acknowledgement. You have to, along with setting out the terms, set out the terms.
Yeah.
It just needs to be that.
Yeah.
Because it is so.
And that's why it is tough. Like it's tough, like for me to go into a women's Bible study and say, okay, I'm going to change this up a little, gals. We're going to start listening to each other. And like in a Bible study, if you're saying, okay, we're going to study this passage with the theme of, how can we be better servant hearts, or how can we whatever, then the idea is that everyone comes to start exhorting and encouraging each other based on what they see in the text. It could be hugely fruitful, right? But I just don't see that happening, right? That's and from where I've been, right? And that's maybe just because I've limited myself. They're probably out there. I just, so I do want to talk about just a few resources before we move on, because it's 8:00, not bad. One of my favorite books on this is The Liberal Arts Tradition. And what it shows here at the beginning is it's quite small, so I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I want to show you this graph. It's a tree. And it shows right here at the bottom, this is piety, right? That's the foundation. Those are the roots that we want our children to have deeply. And then as it goes, we're going to teach them music and gymnastics. And that's where they learn actually like physical discipline. Because you can teach a child like in sports when they're like 5 years old, you got to play soccer and you got to run hard, buddy. You couldn't run, you got to run. And they can understand that they're pushing themselves, right? And we do that because as we go up, we go through the quadrivium and the trivium. And as we move higher into like philosophy and theology, and we move into these intellectual arts, then we actually have to do the same push intellectually that we learned as a 5-year-old on the soccer field, right? So that you can push yourself little 5-year-old, you've got a teenager needing to do hard intellectual things, you can say, you can push yourself, right? It's different, but it's the same. So I like this graph here. It really kind of shows the progression of what I was talking about. This one here, Tending the Heart of Virtue, is absolutely beautiful. Again, it talks about shaping our children's moral imagination, why it's important that we read them good stories and we have good, deep conversations with them when they're young. Because again, a huge influencer is going to be the stories they read, because those are going to be experiences that they didn't have, but they did have, because it affects them emotionally, that we can draw on. And then finally, this program, I absolutely love this program. This is how to teach literature using Socratic dialogue. And it comes with a set of 8, it comes with a set of DVDs. It's about 8 hours, 8 DVDs, 8 sessions. And Adam Andrews goes through literature and he teaches you how to teach it Socratically. And so he'll read through a text and he explains this as his storyboard to help a student understand literature. Every story is basically made up of this. And so he teaches you how to fill that in, asking questions. The reason why this is a really great resource to start to learn how to do Socratic dialogue is because literature is one of the easiest places, because you have like a text, right? You've actually got something you can work off of. And then to make it even more helpful, in the back, they have questions for each one of these areas, right? So questions about conflict or theme or characters or plot. So how do we draw that out? And so you can literally take any book in the world and you can start, here's your questions about setting. And they are listed in order of age. So you can start this with like a 4 or 5-year-old. Just start asking questions, and then you can go on deeper into, like, this is like deep teenage stuff. But like for 5-year-olds, again, we're doing Socratic, but we're not doing it to help them analyze. We're doing it to help them understand the facts. So what do we ask a 4 or 5-year-old? In what country or region does the story happen? Right? What are the facts? Does the story happen in the country or the city? What are the facts? And as we go along, we start asking, is the setting of the story important because of historical events which may have taken place there? How does this help you understand the themes of the story? See how far we went, right? From like those little kids right to that teenager. So I really love this as a resource just to help us learn to ask questions. And then once you've done this a few times, it really helps your listening skills to ask questions to bring about more understanding in the group. Okay. I do. You can't really do it without the DVDs. You need to talk. You need to listen to Adam Andrews' lectures. Just for the parents. Yeah, I've done it 2 or 3 years in a row with a group of parents. In the summer, we've watched the lectures, and we each have our storybook. And like we had one session there where like all of us parents, we were just sobbing. It was so powerful. It's the story he uses, Papa Pavlov's Christmas, where he keeps saying, Jesus is going to come, Jesus is going to come. And, you know, all these people, the lady comes with her baby and he gives her the little shoes that his son had. And then the man comes, he's so hungry, and he gives him a cup of coffee. At the end of the day, the man who's saying, he's like, Jesus didn't come. So sure he was going to come. And then he has a dream, and Jesus said, I came in the form of a woman with a baby who needed warmth and shoes, and in the form of a man who needed warmth and coffee. And Jesus shows him how he was, you know, serving. And so Adam Andrews goes through this story, and it's just like, bawling.
You said you did that with parents, and you need to do that with your children. That's like a parent resource.
This is a parent resource.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you do it with parents, right? And then when it's done, then you go on and you do it with students, you apply it. And he has they have like guides, so you can use this based on, like, he's got Cricket in Times Square and a few other books where he uses this, and he has those questions already set out for you. And so I did that a few times for, like, with my kids. I used his templates, but then after you do it a while, both you and the kids start to get it, and you just want to dig in, like, just drop the books. We don't have time for that anymore. Yeah. So, yeah.
a note.
Yeah, for sure.
In our BC curriculum, we do have critical thinking
Okay.
as aspects, even for kindergartners.
Okay.
So there's like communication, thinking, and then personal and social awareness are like 3 little bubbles that like our teachers will ask us about all the time. And I teach critical thinking, and I agree with you that this is for teenagers. It's not really applied for little ones. And so I thought, if you don't mind, I could share. There's a couple ways that we can do this with our children so that we're still teaching them like developing critical thinking skills, but it's really more like teaching them how to have multiple perspectives, teaching them aspects of resiliency. So like how to bounce back when something's really difficult for them. And obviously open-ended questions and asking them to just start talking and giving them a safe place to just share whatever they share.
Yeah.
And then those are like ways that we are teaching critical thinking, even though it's not really appropriate yet.
Yeah.
Because it is in our curriculum.
Well, and I think there's ways where what like the government would require as critical thinking, we can work with that definition, right? Which is why, like, for the purposes of this evening, I wanted to get more like a kind of a mainstream definition of critical thinking to talk about. But like, if your school is like saying, does your first grader do critical thinking? You can say, yeah, we talked about the importance of thinking through not throwing Lego in the toilet.
Cause and effect.
You know, like
I put our project in the toilet, it will disintegrate.
Yeah.
And plug it up.
Exactly. Mom and dad will be very upset with you. This may or may not have happened in my life. But yeah, so like I totally agree with you. That's why, but again, it's like what you're doing is you're highlighting the importance of us defining our terms, right? So when the government says teach your 1-year-old critical thinking, I wouldn't use this definition in that context at all, right? And so yeah, so
unless you're trying to talk about your child, like when you hit your sister, how do you think she feels? Like we can be objective in that. Well, I think she would hurt.
Yeah.
In that case, we can say sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Making game.
Yeah. So again, definitions, very important. Very important.
Sorry, what age?
When they're ready.
What, 14-ish?
Yeah, like I think
It
think
comes on really strong between 14 and 15.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really strong. Trust me, you'll see the signs.
You'll
They'll
know.
be there. 13, it's like, yeah, they're testing the waters. By 14, they're there.
So like
I have no experience.
I have an almost 15-year-old, so if you see like the bags getting deeper, you'll know. You'll know.
Yeah, no,
Um,
for real, they'll tell you.
Well, but it's the same thing with the dialectic stage.
Yeah.
Like they go from this like happy-go-lucky, the world is all wonderful, to like waking up one morning, they're like, why are you making me eat this for breakfast? I had this yesterday. Don't you know this isn't healthy for you?
Why are we getting that
like,
again?
what is like yesterday you were 2. Now you're like old man grumpy.